When people talk about the Philippines, you'll sometimes hear it described as a third world country. It's a phrase that gets thrown around casually online, in comment sections, and even in everyday conversation. But here's the thing, that label is outdated, inaccurate, and misleading. The Philippines is not considered a third world country in modern economic and political terminology. Instead, it's classified as a developing country, and those two terms are not the same thing. In this video, I'm going to break down the difference between a developing country and a third world country, why the Philippines is categorized as the way that it is, and what the country's economic and social progress actually looks like. I'm Mike. Welcome back to my channel. Let's start with the biggest misunderstanding, the term third world. The phrase third world originally had nothing to do with poverty or economic development. It was coined during the Cold War in the mid-20th century. At that time, the world was divided into three political blocs. The first world referred to capitalist countries aligned with the United States and Western Europe. The second world referred to communist countries aligned with the Soviet Union. And the third world referred to countries that were not aligned with either side. Many of these nations were newly independent countries in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. Over time, because many of those countries were still developing economically, the phrase third world became incorrectly associated with poverty and underdevelopment. But the Cold War ended in 1991, and the political meaning of the term essentially became obsolete. Today, economists, governments, and international organizations almost never use the phrase third world. Instead, they use terms like developed countries, developing countries, emerging economies, or low-income and middle-income nations. And under those modern classifications, the Philippines is considered a developing country and an emerging market economy. So what exactly does that mean? A developing country is a nation that is in the process of industrializing and improving its economic and social conditions. These countries typically have growing economies, expanding infrastructure, rising urban populations, and improving standards of living. However, they may still face challenges such as income inequality, poverty in certain regions, or gaps in infrastructure. A developing country isn't stagnant. It's in transition. It's moving forward. A so-called third world country, in the outdated sense people use the term today, usually implies a place with extreme poverty, little infrastructure, weak institutions, and very limited economic activities. Think of countries that struggle with chronic famine, ongoing conflict, or near total economic collapse. That description simply does not match the Philippines. Let's look at some facts. The Philippines has one of the largest economies in Southeast Asia. Its economy ranks among the top 40 in the world in total GDP. Over the past few decades, the country has experienced significant economic growth driven by industries such as services, manufacturing, tourism, remittance from overseas Filipino workers, and a rapidly growing technology sector. Cities like Manila, Cebu City, and Davao City are major urban centers with modern infrastructure, international airports, universities, hospitals, and large business districts. The Philippines is also a major global hub for business process outsourcing, often called BPO. International companies outsource customer service, IT services, accounting, and technical support to Filipino workers. The industry employs more than 1 million people and contributes billions of dollars to the economy every year. Another major pillar of the Philippine economy is remittances. Millions of Filipinos work overseas and send money home to support their families. These remittances represent a significant percentage of the country's GDP and help support consumer spending and economic stability. Now, before we talk about infrastructure and modernization in the Philippines, let's look at some other countries that don't compare to how developed the Philippines is. There are still countries where large portions of the population lives with little or no infrastructure, no reliable electricity, limited access to clean water, almost no internet connectivity, very weak cell phone coverage, and very few paved roads connecting communities. One example is South Sudan, the world's youngest nation. After decades of conflict and instability, the country's infrastructure remains extremely limited. Outside of the capital, most roads are dirt tracks that become nearly impassable during the rainy season. Electricity is scarce, and large areas rely on generators or have no power at all. Access to clean water and sanitation is also limited in many rural communities. Another example is Central African Republic. Years of political instability and conflict have severely slowed development. Many communities are isolated because paved roads are rare and infrastructure investment has been difficult to maintain. Electricity grids are limited mostly to small areas, and internet connectivity is among the lowest in the world. In Chad, one of the largest landlocked countries in Africa, infrastructure is also extremely limited outside of major towns. Many rural communities rely on wells or rivers for water, and electricity access is very low in remote regions. Road networks are sparse, and during certain seasons, travel between regions can become extremely difficult. Similarly, in Somalia, decades of civil conflict destroyed much of the country's infrastructure. While some cities have seen improvement in recent years, many rural communities still lack reliable electricity, public water systems, and modern road networks. In parts of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, the situation is similar. Despite having enormous natural resources, much of the country remains underdeveloped. Dense forests, vast distances, and political instability have made infrastructure development extremely challenging. In some areas, transportation still relies on rivers or unpaved paths rather than highways. It's important to understand that these conditions don't exist because people in those countries don't want development. They do. But in many cases, the obstacles include long-term conflict, political instability, geographic challenges, poverty, and limited investment. Infrastructure takes decades to build and requires stability, funding, and strong institutions. While much of the world continues to modernize rapidly, these countries highlight the reality that basic infrastructure, electricity, water, transportation, and communication is still far from universal. And for millions of people, everyday life still means living without the conveniences that many of us rarely even think about. We take them for granted. The Philippines might not be a rich country like Switzerland or Singapore, but over the past decade, the Philippines has been investing heavily in roads, airports, bridges, and rail systems. Major infrastructure programs have expanded highways, built new airports, and improved public transportation networks. These projects aim to reduce congestion, improve logistics, and support long-term economic growth. At the same time, internet connectivity, digital banking, and mobile technology are expanding rapidly. The Philippines has one of the most active social media populations in the world. and its young, tech-savvy workforce is becoming an increasingly important asset in the global digital economy. Demographics also play a role in why economists see the Philippines as a developing country with strong potential. The country has a young and growing population with a median age around the mid-20s. That means a large share of the population is entering the workforce every year. Economists call this a demographic dividend. When a country has more workers relative to dependents, which can accelerate economic growth if jobs and education keep pace. Another factor is education. The Philippines has a relatively high literacy rate and a strong tradition of English proficiency. English is widely used in business, government, and higher education, which makes Filipino workers competitive in global industries. Now, none of this means the Philippines doesn't face challenges. Just like many developing countries, it deals with issues such as poverty in rural areas, traffic congestion in major cities, gaps in infrastructure, and vulnerability to natural disasters like typhoons and earthquakes. Income inequality also exists, meaning economic growth is not always evenly distributed across regions. Some provinces are thriving, while others still struggle with limited investment and fewer job opportunities. But those challenges are precisely why the country is called developing, because it is still improving and evolving. To put it another way, a developing country is not defined by perfection. It's defined by progress. International organizations such as the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund classify the Philippines as a lower middle income economy that has demonstrated strong growth potential. Over the past 20 years, the country has experienced consistent GDP growth, rising incomes, and expanding urban development. Another sign of development is the country's expanding middle class. Shopping malls, residential towers, universities, hospitals, and modern office complexes have grown dramatically across major cities. While rural poverty still exists, millions of Filipinos have moved into the middle class over the past few decades. Tourism is also playing a growing role. The Philippines is home to world-class destinations such as Boracay, Palawan, and Chocolate Hills. Tourism brings international investment, jobs, and infrastructure development to many regions. So when people casually call the Philippines a third world country, they're using a term that is not only outdated, but also fails to capture the country's economic reality. The Philippines is better described as an emerging economy, a country with significant growth potential that is steadily building its industries, infrastructure, and global influence. In fact, many countries that are now considered highly developed, such as South Korea or Singapore, were once classified as developing countries just a few decades ago. Economic development is a long process, and nations move along that path at different speeds. The Philippines is still on that journey, but the direction is clearly moving forward. So the next time someone labels the Philippines a third world country, remember this: that term belongs to the Cold War era. The modern accurate description is developing country. A nation with a growing economy, expanding infrastructure, and young population that will shape its future. And if current trends continue, the Philippines may one day join the ranks of the fully developed economies in the decades to come. The story of the Philippines isn't one of stagnation. It's one of ongoing development. And that's a very different story than the outdated label of third world. Well, that's going to wrap up this video. Thanks for being with me here today. Please remember to like this video and subscribe to my channel. Also, don't forget that bell notification. Then you'll be able to catch future videos. God bless and peace out.